Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer from the woods of New Hampshire.
Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian, expertise always in need of. Happy to have you with us. And we're still dealing with the fallout from the latest indictment of the former president, the T-Rump guy that we always talk about. And you know what? Bob, why don't you cue up Jack Smith, and we'll run a little bit of Jack Smith because he is so concise and so precise. We'll start with him and then go from there, okay?
All right, I think I have them up and ready. Let's see if this will go.
Jack Smith, for folks who probably still know but might forget, special prosecutor.
And here we go.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full.
Okay, cool. That's good enough. We can break it down.
Our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, he listed 3 specific instances that were worthy of the indictment. And Alan, I know you've been keeping close tabs on that. Would you break those 3 things down for us as succinctly as you can before we dissect it and try to...
And just before we get into that, just want to say that we're taping on August 3rd, and as we tape, this guy, Mr. Trump, is on his way to be to face the charges and to show up in court in Washington, D.C. in about a half hour after we tape here. So go ahead, Alan.
Yeah. Basically, our usual Wednesday before what normally would be our air date. But this is EVT Educational Productions and Zoom, and we'll go from there. Go ahead.
All right. One of the things that Smith makes very clear is that Donald Trump, as a citizen and as president, he could campaign to ensure election integrity and challenge fraud if he thought it was the case. He even has the legal right under the First Amendment to lie. Lying is protected speech. But what he can't do is act on the lies. Conspiring with others to act on those lies is illegal when it threatens the integrity of the United States, when it threatens the rights of other citizens. So what he's indicted for is not for lying, but for acting on the lies.
Give us the three issues.
Okay. Well, one is he tried to get illegal electors nominated in a number of states when he knew it wasn't true.
Okay.
That it's an attack on democracy.
A conspiracy to do that is what he's indicted for.
Now, the one I found most interesting is he's actually indicted on an 1870 Reconstruction era anti-Klan act. Because what the Klan had tried to do is to violate the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution by preventing Blacks from voting in the American South. So Congress, to enforce the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, said it is illegal to conspire, to injure, to oppress, to threaten, or intimidate any person exercising a right protected by the Constitution and federal law.
Okay.
Trump violated that law, and that is grounds to go to jail.
Conspiring, that the conspiracy part of that law is what he's also indicted on.
Yes.
And I think there was a third thing to defraud the United States government. I forget where that was rooted in, but that was part of the excuse me, the third one, right?
Now, there are 6 unindicted conspirators
Mhm,
who he conspired with.
mhm.
One of them, co-conspirator number 1, is probably
Okay.
our old frenemy, Rudy Giuliani.
May
It's
well be, yes.
But Smith decided just to indict Trump at this point, though these people can be indicted later, to streamline the case so it could go rapidly through the courts. Smith's goal is that the American people should have resolution before the 2024 presidential election.
Great, laid out nicely, Alan. Bob, we've been seeing all kinds of already defenders break down what they've been saying and dilute it, digest it,
Sure.
do what you can on it. Wow.
And in the meantime, take a glass of water if you have to.
Yes.
But yeah, even on CNN the other day, Trump's attorney, John Lauro, I guess he's relatively new to the assortment of attorneys that he's had, said on CNN that this is a case of freedom of speech, that Trump was free to make his claims, and actually he spun it so that he said that Trump basically had the responsibility to question these elections in these states where he was told, he was advised that there was a problem. But the CNN interviewer, and I should have picked up her name, pushed back right away and said that these charges don't deal with freedom of speech. They're just as you said, Alan, they're conspiracy charges. But Laurel said, if I could pull up one of his quotes, he said, the DOJ has criminalized the free speech and advocacy of a prior administration during the time that there is a political election going on. Now, the fact that there's an election going on has no bearing on whether you get when you get charged with a crime, and it not only criminalizes but also censors free speech. That's what the lawyer is saying. But this seems to play into the Republican playbook of pulling out a snippet, a few words that can be used at rallies and in campaign literature that his followers can grab onto, like hoax, witch hunt, CRT, woke. And now you can add free speech to the list of words they will use to defend what Trump has done. But here, it's not free speech. This is legal. This is law 101. You don't yell fire in a crowded theater. I mean, that free speech has guardrails on it. And there's nothing about the way the courts have supported free speech that would support what Trump did.
But that's a red herring, as you well know, because I read a very interesting piece, a couple of places, one Washington Post, one New York Times, and a couple of other online outlets. And what they were talking about was how astute Jack Smith was in bringing his charges. He didn't bring any charges against Donald Trump pertaining to his speech at the Ellipse. He didn't try to get him for inciting to riot. He did not try to get him for anything pertaining to, quote, free speech. Donald Trump was not indicted for what he said. Donald Trump was incited for what he did. It was an act or a series of acts, and that was why Jack Smith said, I encourage everyone to read the indictment, because he wanted to be specific and clear about those 3 separate indictments, two of which, one is about defrauding the US, the other one with conspiracy, one was that law, and the other one was conspiracy against the fulfillment of the proceedings of the election. And those acts and conspiracy to commit those acts, because the acts were committed, guess what? One of the fraudulent acts was get a slate of fake electors. Well, they got more than one slate of fake electors. How many? Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan. I mean, a gazillion fake electors. Now, what I love about Jack Smith was he said those were all talked about how to bring those fake electors. The testimony that we have, I mean, it's in the indictment, but those were discussions. Donald Trump was part to those discussions. Other people were party to those discussions, and the actions out of those discussions, which was the conspiracy, was actually to try to defraud the federal government of a free and valid election. And so that was a conspiracy, and those were actions, and that indictment sticks. And what I like about the fact of this indictment is it's like a blueprint for others, because Fannie Willis, and we're talking now on these other charges that are pending, right?
In Georgia, correct.
Fannie Willis in Georgia, their last headline I saw, Washington Post, a couple of days ago, was Georgia gears for possible indictments. And they're talking about guardrails going up legally and physically. And because their grand jury actually came out with findings that witnesses before that grand jury probably lied, charges are going to be filed against witnesses who lied. And the fact that Fannie Willis was digging into the specific phone call that former President T. Rump made to Brad Raffensperger, that was interference in the Georgia election. That indictment is sitting out there waiting to come down the pike. Now, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but we talked about Michigan. Michigan came down with a couple more new indictments. We talked about the previous indictments last show, and guess who are being indicted? A couple more fake electors. And so this guy now has 4 indictments against him, right? Already processed, not pending. 4. We got New York for hush money. We got 3 from the special prosecutor for different, one in DC, one in Florida, or something like that, right? But it is, correct me if I'm wrong, actually 4 indictments, right? Not 3. 4 actual.
It's 3 already. The 4th is pending. That's going to be Georgia.
No. New York is 1, but it did. Okay, I think it's 3, but I'm pretty sure 4, at least 3.
Right, right. 3 in the books.
But let me segue, Alan, back to you, because this guy is now basically facing charges that will make him a convicted felon if he's found guilty. But his stock seems to keep rising amongst the GOP faithful, MAGA, and because the other Republicans don't seem to want to run away from him. What's your take, Alan, historically about why is it? I remember we talked about this in the last show. These people can't seem to disassociate themselves from a guy who's actually tried to destroy the democracy.
This is very, very frightening. Though there is one piece that's very curious about this. The Trump campaign is now on financial ropes. Why? Because lawyers are demanding to be paid in advance because Trump has not paid up on money he owed in the past. Mm-hmm. So the lawyers don't believe him. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the voters still do. And I think there's a hardcore, and if you look at the Republican primary, they've been doing a lot of polling. They don't care. Some don't believe he did these things. Some said if he did it, I don't care anyway. And this is not just happening in the United States. This is happening in many democracies where what you have are right-wing forces have been able to mobilize people who are not happy with the way the world is changing. They're not happy with diversity. They're not happy with immigration. They're not happy with the economy. And so there are hardcore, and I have to say, hardcore white people who feel displaced in American society, and they're going to vote for him no matter what. And that's very, very frightening because they don't care what's true. They want someone who they think is going to defend their rights against everybody else.
So it's not about democracy. It's not about the country. It's about white right.
Privilege.
And we had that candidate show up, what was it, last week? I think it was William Hurd, showed up at the Republican, whatever that was, showcase of candidates. And he was the only one who came out and said that Trump is running to keep himself out of prison. That was his quote. And he got mercilessly booed off the stage. The crowd didn't want to hear anything after that. He just got blown off the stage, and then they interviewed DeSantis, who just kept his fingers out of the mess, and other candidates didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
So they're still so afraid of Trump that if they want, their candidates for the GOP nomination, but if they attack Trump too hard, they'll get skewered, and they know it. And that's a dangerous thing to say, because these are followers who, like you said, Alan, don't care. They have their candidate, they don't care.
Trump has made it very clear in the rallies. He said, this is not an attack on me. This is an attack on us. And the unsated is, this is an attack on white people, the real Americans. And you have to vote for me because I'm going to defend you. And it's very scary that people will vote white rather than vote on principles, on issues, rather than vote to protect the country and democracy. And I'm very frightened.
So
it goes to the what did DeSantis do recently? He challenged Vice President Kamala Harris to a debate.
Oh,
and
yes.
And that plays into what you just said. He wants to show his followers the racist edge. This is who you might get, and showcase her to invigorate them, or invigorate us, as he would put it. So yes, it plays into that playbook. I'm
your defender against them. See, I'm the one who took on Kamala Harris, and
yes.
Slavery wasn't that bad.
So the interesting thing is, there was a piece that was written, I think I came across it on my Yahoo News feed last week, and the headline was, "It's Time to Believe Donald Trump." It was written by Chauncey De Vega, Monday, July 31st. And the thrust of the piece was, Donald Trump is basically haranguing his base and his electoral people who believe in all of this QAnon stuff that he has now pretty much embraced, to the point where he is fomenting all kinds of physical threats. And there was an interesting piece. This guy quoted the fact that he publicly on his Truth Social shared what he believed to be the Washington, D.C. home address of former President Barack Obama. And as he intended, one of his MAGA cult members, I'm quoting the Vegas article, who was armed with 2 guns, a machete, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, attempted to gain access to Obama's home with the goal of assassinating him. And so, quoting on his Truth Show, he shared an audio of him saying that if, quote, you FK around with us, if you do something bad to us, we're going to do things to you that you have never been done before. So this guy is out there publicly fomenting violence, and they are letting him get away with that. And there are people who are now calling for him to be not just gagged, but he should be detained and locked up, because he's about to launch all kinds of mayhem. I don't know whether they can do that legally or not, but if he keeps spewing stuff like that and people showing up trying to assassinate people, what are you going to do? You're going to wait for somebody to get shot and killed? You got to tell me.
Unfortunately, we have prior, the Supreme Court has said that prior restraint is something that can't be done. You can't muzzle somebody because of what he might say. So that's part of our, code of, that's part of law at this point. But yeah, Trump is Truth Social has no guardrails, has no moderation. He just blathers there as he sees fit, and that's why he's there. And not even though he's reinstated on Twitter or X, excuse me. He doesn't use it.
My question though is, if you are not just under investigation, but you've been indicted, and you could pose a risk to the general public. People have been detained. People have been put into custody. I mean, judges keep trying to come up with gag orders, but they can't seem to gag this guy. And his speech seems to incite the riot and violence all the time. And so I'm just wondering, is there not just prior restraint, there's prior restraint in speech and there's prior restraint in physical, but someone who's under the threat of trial, pre-trial detention has been known to happen when people are accused of a crime and maybe they're not denied bail. They are denied bail, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's some phase of law where, because of his tendency to foment violence and his incendiary speech, because he's been indicted, is there not some possibility of restraint as opposed to just a gag order?
If he was a threat to himself or others, then he could be restrained. He could be committed to jail.
So these folks are saying that kind of speech where you come out and say, here, go find this guy, and you know what your fellows are inclined to do, and you continue to do that, means he's endangered. He certainly endangered Obama when he put out that address, and that some guy showed up trying to assassinate him. So therefore, he's probably a great danger to other people other than himself. Anyway,
well, I mean, and you have to remember that judges have families too, and no judge wants to be the one that does that. Okay. And
so we're going fair is going to rule the rule of law. So there's no rule of law because of fear. Okay.
I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. I mean, we have new laws now. I guess we had that incident in New Jersey where a judge's home was attacked, and the judge survived. I think it was her husband that got killed.
Husband's son, I think, got killed.
Yeah. Yes. Somebody else in the building in the home. So now we have laws that you can't, disclose the address of a judge, which we need. But yeah, this is a terrible point in history we're at, and make no mistake about it.
Okay, all right. I don't want to belabor Trump too much, too long, because there are indeed, we know these other indictments are pending. Georgia is just about to come out in August, and I'm willing to make book positively that he's going to be indicted in Georgia just because of the phone call, if not all the other things and the fake electors. Okay, I'm willing to make book on that, but we won't know for a couple of weeks on that one. Correct?
Yeah. And we have about 4.5 minutes left.
One thing about Georgia, one of the things that Trump's strategy may be is that if he can postpone the trials and then get elected president, he can pardon himself. But he can pardon himself only for federal offenses. He could not pardon himself for anything that came out of a Georgia trial. So that's another good case. The other thing that's interesting is CNN had discussed how Trump's strategy was based on what they called the big lie. The idea is you tell a lie big enough, sooner or later people start to believe it. Well, what happened was that idea of the big lie was really generated in Nazi Germany in the 1930s by Adolf Hitler and Goebbels, his minister of propaganda. Right. Trump sued CNN, claiming that they had defamed him because by saying he was engaged in a big lie, they were comparing him to Hitler. That gets thrown out of court. So it's just another. Trump has used criminal courts throwing the crap on the wall to try to silence other people for as long as he's been in the public eye.
Interestingly enough, that got thrown out of court, but a similar ruling that Giuliani was up for defaming those two jurors in Georgia, that was not thrown out of court. And I believe the judge in Georgia, where those women filed suit against Rudolph Giuliani, said, yeah, that case can proceed. And Giuliani, interestingly enough, I believe as part of the deposition for that case, said, yeah, I kind of told that lie. Yeah, it was a lie. He actually admitted to the lie. And so what does that say about what his chances are in that trial for defaming those two women? I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, but the fact that he's admitted to the fact that it was a lie tells me he might be in some serious trouble. What do you
Let's
think?
hope so.
Anyway, we're about out of time, probably. How much time?
No, we still have 2 minutes left.
Right. But the difference is Trump is a public figure. Those women were not public figures. They were civil servants doing their job.
Mhm.
And so Trump could be criticized. He had no right to lie about those two women. And he's in serious trouble. The other thing, I understand he's broke. He's got a lot of legal issues. The Trump campaign finally agreed to cover some of them after a long time of refusing.
Huh. Yeah, right. The Trump campaign, the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been paying legal fees for some of these crazy, bogus lawyers that back Donald Trump's attempts to prove the big lie was not a big lie. And they all lost all those cases in court, which is why the judge was saying, a few people were saying they can't relitigate the case of the election being a fraud to delay the trial. They have to go to trial based on the indicted charges, not, oh, well, he thought he was telling the truth. But that's another whole legal tangle that I'm sure we'll be getting into down the road as they try to delay the trial. And with that having been said, I'm guessing we're about out of time.
We still have a full minute.
Well, then,
full minute.
Yeah.
Well,
Eric, we have a heavy responsibility on us because as the election approaches, we are going to have to continually make the case that democracy is something to be valued, that truth is something to be valued, that people like Trump, authoritarians, liars, with no respect for the nation as it is and no respect for people, cannot be in charge. So we can have a very heavy responsibility to make sure, one, that he's not reelected, but two, that we can begin to bring some of these people back into the fold. We just can't dismiss 40% of the population and say they're crazy.
And with that,
we're out of time. Okay.
Yes.
How do we fix that? We'll talk about it in a future show. This has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer from the woods of New Hampshire.
And thank you, Dr. Singer, for joining us. And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.